It is January 6, 2025, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced that he plans to resign this year as soon as his party can find a replacement. He's been in power for nearly a decade now, but it looks like he's finally paying attention to opinion polls and stepping out of the race before Canada gets to its elections, which are set to be held later this year. It marks the end for yet another one of Zelensky's friends. And speaking of Zelensky, he gave quite the performance during a 3-hour sit-down podcast that was released over the weekend. And despite all of that time, one of the things that he did not want to talk about were the latest advances by the Russian military in the Donbass region. Instead, Kiev has got its focus on the counteroffensive that it just launched in Russia's Kursk region, which Russia is now promptly responding to. We are going to get into all of the latest because there is a lot going on this first Monday of 2025. So let's get to it. So Justin Trudeau made the announcement first thing Monday morning that he plans to resign as soon as Canada's Liberal Party finds his replacement. He cited internal battles as the reason why he won't be seeking a fourth term after 9 years in power. And it's not as if Trudeau will be going out on a high note, as the latest opinion polls have pretty much spelled defeat for himself and his party when it comes to Canada's upcoming elections that are set to be held in October. And as reports noted, public opinion polls released in late 2024 and early this year indicate that Trudeau's approval rating fell to around 20% and that his Liberal Party trails the Conservatives by over 20 percentage points. It's shocking, really, that Trudeau's COVID-sponsored power trip, his increasingly authoritarian policies, his unconditional support for Ukraine, which includes support for escalating tensions in NATO's war against Russia, it's shocking that all of that was not more popular with the public. And I don't even know if Trudeau cares at this point, right? I mean, hey, at least he's still popular with Zelensky. In fact, Trudeau was the go-to guy when Zelensky was trying to get his Western backers, like the US, to remove restrictions and directly engage in the launch of long-range strikes deep inside Russian territory. And he needed someone to whisper kindly into their ear and convince them to take just one more step closer to World War III. And who could forget my personal favorite memory of Zelensky and Trudeau when they stood together back in September 2023 in Canada's House of Commons, and they gave a standing ovation to a literal Nazi, a 98-year-old World War II veteran who was celebrated by the Canadian Parliament for his fight against Russia. And I would think that maybe they just forgot which side was fighting against Russia in that battle, but I genuinely don't think they did. I think that they were cheering on this literal Nazi and just kind of sitting back to see how the public would respond. Oh, and the public did respond. All right. But of course, that was not the single thing that got Trudeau removed from office. It's been a little bit since that stunt. But when it comes to Trudeau's resignation, he's also just the latest in a long line of Zelensky's friends that have had to say goodbye because they fell out of grace with the public in their home country. And that is soon going to include all of Zelensky's friends over in the Biden administration here in the US. But Zelensky hasn't given up hope. At least that's how he tried to portray himself during a 3-hour-long sit-down interview with podcaster Lex Friedman that was released over the weekend. That's where Zelensky claimed he believes that Trump can broker peace with Russia and end the war in Ukraine, saying, quote, "Trump and I will come to an agreement and offer security guarantees together with Europe, and then we can talk to the Russians." He then went on to say, quote, "I think that President Trump not only has all of these possibilities, and it's not just talk. I really count on him, and I think that our people really count on him. So he has enough power to pressure him to pressure Putin." Now, do I think that Zelensky is singing Trump's praises because he knows that the Donald is on his way back to the White House in a couple of weeks, and he's not exactly going to be the way Biden has been for the last 4 years, where he has essentially given Zelensky just about whatever he has wanted on a silver platter? Yes, I do. But I also think that there are a few things that Zelensky is leaving out there, such as the fact that he himself signed a decree stating that he was not allowed to have any negotiations with the Russian government for as long as Vladimir Putin was the president. And he is still sitting there claiming that, oh, they just have to apply more pressure on Russia. Like Trump's going to come in and add some more sanctions to the list, as Russia is already the most sanctioned nation in the world. More pressure. And then he adds in some security guarantees. It's like he does not live in the same reality that I think the rest of us live in, or maybe a lot of us live in, because you still have Zelensky in this position where he's looking at the reports that we've all seen, right, that are coming from these anonymous sources referred to as Trump insiders, claiming that Trump is going to come in, that he's going to give Russia some guarantee of a frozen conflict, and that Russia's just going to hop on board of what would essentially be the latest and greatest version of the Minsk Accords, when Russia on its end has said that that kind of a plan would be a non-starter for peace talks. They've said, no, we're not going to agree to that. Why would we? We're winning on the battlefield. But beyond that, this idea that we should just freeze the conflict for the next 10 to 20 years while NATO does what they did the first time around, which is to rebuild the Ukrainian military and arm them to the teeth while still controlling policy in Kiev, that's not something that Russia would want to agree to, right? They're not wanting to say, hey, yeah, let's just freeze the war that we're currently winning, a war of attrition, right? A very long, a very brutal, a very costly war all around. Yes, but let's not just freeze that now, knowing that we may have to start from scratch and fight the same war all over again in 20 years, and also knowing that there's really no guarantee of peace for those next 20 years. And to a certain extent, it was more of the same from Zelensky on this podcast, right? I didn't really hear anything that was groundbreaking, at least to me, that stood out in a way as being something vastly different than what Zelensky has previously said. Now, he did make a couple of interesting points about what he claimed he said to Trump during one of their meetings, which was that he said that he urged the president-elect to illegally hand over the frozen Russian assets the U.S. has access to so that Kiev can buy more U.S. weapons and then use the reserves as a security guarantee in potential peace negotiations with Moscow. Yeah, I'm not sure that's how it works. Granted, there may have been some translation issues there, as it's also important to note that while both Zelensky and Lex Friedman are native Russian speakers, and Lex requested to do the interview purely in Russian so that they could both understand each other, and then obviously there would be a version of an English subtitle, or there would be English translations dubbed over their interview, Zelensky insisted that he wanted to do the interview in Ukrainian, requiring them both to have translators. But Zelensky did not sit there and do that entire 3-hour podcast purely in Ukrainian, because as reports have noted, Zelensky seemed to be attempting to channel the character that he played on the Ukrainian TV series called Servant of the People before he was elected, where he was a foul-mouthed populist president. The only problem is that he seemed to have a hard time portraying the real-life version, and he kept switching back and forth, trying to keep up with his Ukrainian, but resorting to Russian several times, including whenever he had a string of profanities to unleash. Not very presidential, if you ask me, but I did think it was interesting that Friedman later remarked that the most powerful and dynamic conversation he had with Zelensky was at the times when it was happening in Russian. So where does that leave us? Well, just 2 weeks from today, Donald Trump is set to return to the White House, and he is going to find a Ukraine that is being kept on life support by the West right now, with not a lot of appetite from the public to really increase financial or military support right now. In fact, as we know, Trump has specifically campaigned on ending the war in Ukraine. He's going to find as well that a lot of the tensions between the US and Russia that have escalated recently have happened specifically since Trump was elected, as you have the Biden administration in this position of this apparent last-ditch effort of trying to get the US to the point of no return when it comes to direct war against against Russia. And while I'm curious about just how honest Trump's advisors will be when it comes to telling him what is actually going on in Ukraine right now, we at least know that if they are being fully honest, then they would be telling Trump all about the advances that Russia is making in the Donbass. That's where Russian forces confirmed that they had taken the Ukrainian transport hub of Kurakhovo in the Donetsk region on Monday. Russia's defense ministry released a statement in which it described the town as the largest settlement in southwest Donbass, which they said the Ukrainian military had deployed over 15,000 troops, including many foreign mercenaries, in order to try to defend. But notably, Zelensky and the West, they're not talking about the latest Russian gains in the Donbass. Instead, as is usually the case, they're trying to divert attention elsewhere. As you have Kiev announcing a new counteroffensive aimed at reinforcing their months-long incursion into Russia's Kursk region, even though reports say the Biden administration told Ukrainian leaders last month to pull their forces from Russia before their retreat was cut off. And Russia is already fighting back, with the Russian Defense Ministry stating on Monday that it had destroyed 10 tanks and killed hundreds of Ukrainian troops in just over a day since Kiev launched its counteroffensive. And I think it will be really important to watch what does become the focus of the news cycle over the next 2 weeks. Is it going to be this narrative of North Korean troops in Russia fighting alongside Russian forces in Kursk? Because that's something that the West had tried to sell before, even though we still have not seen any evidence of those claims. Or will it be something else? Will the Biden administration serve to increase tensions with Russia even more as it is on its way out of office? And of course, how will Russia respond? I mean, there have been multiple attacks just in the last month, which Russia has said will require a response. That response has yet to be carried out. So it makes me wonder, is that going to happen before Trump gets into office? Are the attacks that the U.S. has carried out under the Biden administration in recent weeks going to be forgiven because you have a new administration saying that they want peace? Or is there going to be some kind of escalation still? And as we watch to see what the Biden administration's final days are going to look like, what trouble they're going to stir up, as well as we keep an eye on and wait for what the first days of the Trump administration are going to look like. Is there going to be any attempt at peace? Are we going to see more of the same, just kind of packaged a bit differently? I think it's more important than ever to keep an eye on the media, the narratives that it is spinning, and the fact that no matter what story they're talking about, when it comes to U.S. foreign policy, they are continuing to promote the war machine. They are continuing to promote more and more of the same, even though the public continues to say time and time again that that is not what they want. And that's something everyone should be talking about. If anything in this video resonated with you, be sure to like it, share it with your friends, leave a comment. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all of my work, make sure that you're subscribed to my page on Substack. That's rachelblevins.substack.com. That's where you'll find ad-free videos as well as a brand new episode of Sanctioned released on Sunday, in which we got into all of the latest happening over in Syria and whether the U.S. military is in the process of building a new base there, specifically on the border with Turkey, and what that could mean for the current tensions. You can also catch Sanctioned over on my page on Patreon. That's patreon.com/RachelBlevins. As always, thank you all so much for all of your support, and I'll see you next time.